I got a call from Frank Barcelona in New York. And he said, if you can get me $125,000 by tomorrow, you're my new promoter in LA. Well, that was like, oh my God. So I mortgaged my house.
Hello there, folks, and welcome to RenmanMusicandBusiness.com. My name is Steve Rennie, and I am the Renman. And this little program is called Renman Live. Hey, if you're looking to do something great in this music business, then you're probably in the right place today, and you're probably going to need some help. And I went ahead too fast already. So if you're looking to learn about the music business, we've been getting together with some of the smartest, most talented people in the music business here for some time now, talking with you about today's music business. And we hope this will be your opportunity to call in and get some advice for some real players in the music business. Today, our guest is big-time concert promoter, Mr. Brian Murphy, who's the president of the West Coast of Golden Voice, our good buddies over there on La Brea, Wilshire, somewhere in that neighborhood. Okay, that voice you hear we'll introduce in just a minute. If you're looking to do something good, you're going to need some help. I know I need some help around here, a lot of help, probably more than I can afford. But I have a great team who helps me, and I want to introduce them right now. Over in the corner on the keyboards, we call him the Trojan Man. His name is Katy And over to his right, that young, thin man who's spending his third day in his new hometown of Los Angeles, California, before he was the mystical, magical social media manager behind the Wizard's curtain in South Carolina. I'll bet you're glad you're not there today, Mr. Joseph Pepalonius. Give him a little applause, Code. Come on, don't be so tight-ass. Come on. How you doing here, Joseph?
Great.
Good. We haven't mic'd him up yet. We're not sure we're going to keep him. And finally, over last but not least, he feels like he's been demoted to the producer's chair. I said, no, that's an upgrade. When you stand around and everybody thinks you're important, that's good. He's a USC Trojan music industry student. He's also my son. Ladies and gentlemen, would you please welcome Evan, the Evanator Rennie. All right. All right. Okay. And while we're at it, let me take the piss out of my wife. Oh, go back to the camera for there, Code. That lady, come on, jump in there a little bit, hon. That hand you see, there you go. It's a family affair. That's my wife, Randy, who's here taking notes, and she's going to let me know everything I did wrong as soon as we're done today. How am I doing so far, hon? Great.
We have a couple of other people who are
sure. Okay, there you have it. Over here in the corner, he doesn't get on the camera, though. His name is Matt Rennie. He's the oldest Rennie boy, another music business hopeful, and one of our brightest interns made good. Her name is Killer Kira Neal. Jump in there, Kira. You know Killer Kira. You know, she used to be hell on wheels in that chat room, folks. Pepalonius might be a little nicer, you know. Kira kept the order over there, I'm telling you that. So anyway, if you're new to the Renman music world, let me give you a brief tour and tell you what we're up to here. If you're looking for some information about the music business, I suggest that you start by typing in www.RenmanMB.com. It'll take you right here to our fine website. If you just click around on our website, you cannot help but find some information you didn't know about from some of the smartest people around. Now, if you have a specific question about the music business and didn't know who to ask, your problem is solved. I want you to go click on that Ask Renman section of the site, and you can post your question right here, and I promise you I will answer it either on video or old school by just typing it in. Now, if you're watching, oh, by the way, you have to be a member of the site to ask questions. Nothing is truly free here. And so if you want to go over here, click and register for the site, tell us what you're interested in doing, and you are ready to go. Now, if you're watching the show today, and I hope you are, clearly you are if you're here right now, let me tell you how to do it. If you come over to our website right here and click on the Renman Live tab at the top, it'll take you over to our section right here. If you've got a question you want to ask today, over on the right-hand side of our player is the chat room. You put your question there, and Joseph Pepaloni will take the best questions and pass them my way. Now, if you love that old school approach, and my guest and I were old schoolers here, you can pick up the phone and call us on the hotline, 310-469-9067. It's free. Folks, did I mention that it's free? And just because it's free, I'm not above bribing you a little bit. So if you want to move to the front of the class to inspire you to do that, we're going to give you a copy of our free or our online course, which is not free. You actually have to pay for it. But today it's free. It's called the RenmanU Insider's Guide to Today's Music Business. And the phone is already ringing. Tell them to hang on 1 second. I got important business. Okay, did we cover everything, Code? I think we did. Producer boy, are we good? He's behind the gun. Okay, great. 80 on his quiz. He's marginal so far. Just kidding, hon. We're having fun here. So I already got a demerit. Okay, enough of this frivolity. Our guest today has been one of the top concert promoters in the music business for the better part of, I'm going to say it, 40 years. During that time, he has promoted concerts by just about every single big act that has walked on this planet over that time. I first met him almost 35 years ago. At the time, I was fresh out of USC and was booking a number of small shows around Southern California. And he was the most successful, most powerful promoter in all of Southern California. At some point, for reasons I'm not sure, maybe he'll share today, he asked me to his office to meet him and his partner, a gentleman by the name of Bob Getty. Shortly thereafter, he offered me a gig at the biggest promoter in town, Avalon Attractions, that changed my life. I've worked side by side with him for the next 7 years. His support, his encouragement, and his advice helped me in ways that I couldn't possibly express today. All those lessons are still with me today. Ladies and gentlemen, would you please welcome my music mentor, Mr. Brian Murphy. Murph, over here. Over here. Okay. Murphy was always a behind-the-scenes guy, so he never had to step out and take the bow. First off, Murphy, I want to say thanks for joining us here today on the show and taking the time out of your busy day to come and share the love with us, you know.
Another beautiful LA 80-degree day.
80 plus, moving up.
And I don't want to be in the office. So
yeah, perfect. Well, we'll take care of that. Hopefully the folks in the office are watching here today. At the top, I mentioned that you played an important role for me as a mentor. You and Bob Getty's, and I've said it a million times when you're not around. I'll say it again while you're here. You know, helped shape my mentality about the business in different ways. You know, Bob, you know, we know Bob, kind of Clint Eastwood is. Brian Murphy always had the soft touch, and if I have any soft touch at all, I owe it to you. And so I'm hoping that today we can share some of that knowledge and advice and experience with some of the folks that are looking to do something big in the music business. So there you have it.
All right.
Murph, this is our 120th show here today, right?
Wow.
And most of the folks that watch our program over the last 3 years are looking to do something in the music business, but the fact is most of them are just getting started. And as folks like us that have been in the business know, there are as many getting started stories as there are people that are in the music business. So this little section of our program is called Getting Started. We came up with a sexy new graphic for you, Murph. I had a little AC/DC twang to it.
Thank you.
Oh, there you have it. So let me ask you the same question, Murph, that I've asked everybody that's been on the show. How did you, kid from Washington, get in the music business?
College.
College.
That was it. I was a baseball player. Mm-hmm. Thought I was going to be a great baseball player. Got to college, found out I wasn't all that fucking good. So I walked down to the student government office, a small campus, and I said, "You guys need anybody to do anything?" They said, "Yeah, we need a program director. We need somebody to book the concerts." And I was like, "Well, I'll do that." Mm-hmm. And that was it. That was 1968.
It's funny, you know, that's how I got started in the concert business as well. You know, walked in, somebody said, "Hey, you want to book concerts?" And I thought, yeah, great. What's funny today is how many people I meet, young people in the business, that are trying to get started in the business that aren't on the concert committee. I've never been able to understand why they didn't take advantage of that. You know, at some point I recall you told me you started off to be a teacher, though. Is that after the Major League Baseball career didn't pan out?
There was this thing that I wasn't going to go to college. It was, it was the summer of '65, and I wasn't going to go to school. I was going to play. I had a job with the Spokane Indians AAA ball club. Duke Snyder as the manager, and Peter O'Malley as the general manager. And
Nice.
I had this great job on the ground crew. I got to work out with the team. I didn't travel with the team. I wasn't signed by the team, but they were scouting me. And then this thing happened called the Vietnam War. And it was like, okay, it's August. I have to be in school in a month. There was one school that accepted me on a baseball scholarship. So I took it, went to Central Washington University in Ellensburg, and played ball for a couple of years, and then did concerts for a couple of years.
So when you started the business, it wasn't, I always talk about this thing, one of the lessons I learned from Bob Getty's where he talked about this idea of some things, he told me something at one point about, there are a million things whisper at you, Steve. I'm only interested in the screams or something to that effect. The music business, it sounds like you kind of stumbled in the music business rather than had some passion for since you were a young guy.
My passion had always been fantasizing when I listened to the radio or the stereo is that I was the guy up on stage. That was the only thing I ever thought about in the music business. I still do it today, but that's never going to happen. So I settled for the next best seat in the house because at every concert that I sit at, I'm in the most expensive seat in the building.
Which we'll talk about here in a minute why that's true. It seems like a fun seat, but it can be a very expensive ride.
Seat, yeah.
Let me ask you this, you were in Washington, which is Washington State, which is a great place and lots of great things happening up there, but it's not really an epicenter or a hub of the music business. How did you make the transition from Washington State to Los Angeles? And I'm asking that because I get so many people that are in small cities, my wife who is from Sioux Falls, that are dreaming about doing something, and they ask me, should I make the move? Thoughts?
Listen, I gleaned onto this right away, and the first thing that I realized is that I had Oregon State, University of Washington, Washington State, Idaho, Montana, and about 9 other small colleges like I did that were all buying talent. And when you were the first one buying, you paid a lot of money. And then they had to route the rest of the dates, and all the schools were getting it for cheaper. So I went and I put a conference together in Seattle for all these universities. Put them together, and I said, let's do this together. I'll give me your budget, give me your dates. I'll line up the talent. I'll run it all by you. You guys will sign all the contracts. I won't make any commitments for you. But let me negotiate the fees that we're going to pay, because one of us is always getting screwed. At least one of us.
And you knew who it was.
Yeah, the first guy in.
That's something that we faced over and over again later on in your career. That problem seemed to never go away in some ways.
So I got some. There was a North American College Concert Association.
The NACA?
In South Carolina, Joseph. And the guy heard about my conference, and he came out, and he was a big deal, had been doing it a long time, and I got a lot of relationships from him and from doing this conference because I invited all the agents to it. All the West Coast agents, I said, come on up, you got, every school is going to be there. So I gave everybody like 10 minutes and to pitch themselves and finally meet the people that they talked to. And anyway, it took off from there. I got a lot of attention in LA from agencies. So when I graduated, I got an offer from William Morris. And an offer from ICM, which is international. Yeah, all right.
International
so from
Creative
ICM.
Management. Yeah.
Yeah. So I came down here. In August. I think Woodstock was going on in New York, and the Tate LaBianca murders were going on in Los Angeles that weekend, and. It was crazy. So I walked over to William Morris, and I walked in their offices, and I just hated them. I hated the office. I was just like, wow, this this kind of blows. But I did the interview, and they made me an offer. And then I walked from William Morris over to ICM on Beverly Boulevard. 3 stories, all glass. Everybody's got a great view. And I went, well, I hope they offer me a job because I'm going to work here before I work over there. They offered me a job. I moved to Los Angeles. I lasted 6 months as an agent. I hated every minute of it. I had been a college buyer. I started a college division for this agency. Elliot Roberts, Crosby, Stills, Nash and Young, Ken Craig, these old names, had these bands. So I would go book a tour, and they would tell me how much they wanted, and I would go out and work with people with their budgets, and then I would come back with the tour, and the guy said, well, that was easy. It was so easy, go get $2,500 more from these guys. And I said, that's not how it works.
Yeah. It's funny.
And when an agent tells a manager that, that's really never a great conversation.
Yeah.
But I came from the other side. So I just said, 6 months in LA. I called up a buddy in Seattle who was quitting a job, and I said, is that job open? And he said, yeah. And I said, well, I'm going to come up and interview for it. So I interviewed with a theatrical company that had just started.
Back in Washington.
Back in Washington. So I moved up to Seattle, and that's where I spent the first 2 years of my real career learning the business. It was in Seattle.
Gotta love it. Let me ask you another question here. You mentioned the most expensive seat in the house. I can't think of many people that love music that haven't been to a concert or 2 or 10 or 100, when all is said and done. And I think everybody kind of wants to be that promoter, right? Or you go to 1 million shows in LA, they're all sold out because they're all big acts, right? And then you decide you want to be a promoter, and of course all those shows sell out, right? So over the years, I became convinced that while going to a concert and being a promoter is a cool idea, it's not quite what it seems, and that most people really don't have a clue of exactly what it is a promoter does. So my question is this. If you were going to explain in lay terms to people out there, here's what a concert promoter does for real, what would you tell them?
Well, listen, what a concert promoter did for real when I started in the business and what a concert promoter does today are 2 very different things. First of all, you risk your own money when you were a concert promoter back in the old days. Honestly, I learned how to market. I learned the most important person in my town was the program director of the whatever alternative station, the rock station, the classic rock station, whatever. Those were the most important people to me because I could. In those days, you could actually play music for program directors. You could say, "I'm turned on to this act, and I really love them. What do you think?" And they might add them. If they added them, then I got to promote it. But everything. Actually, I started off when I came to LA. When I came back to Los Angeles in 1973 without a job. Came down here to become a concert promoter because I had become a very big fish in Seattle in a very short period of time. So it was like, well, this can't be that fucking hard. So I want to be in the biggest city that I can be in because that's the biggest opportunity. So I moved back to LA and I could not get arrested. There were 5 concert companies and no one would touch me. Absolutely no.
Is that because it was such a clubby little business back then? It wasn't big public companies, and we'll talk about that a little more here. But was it just the problem breaking into the club?
These were just
sound familiar, Kira? Yeah.
Yeah. There was one big concert company in LA, Wolf and Rissmiller Concerts, and then there were like 3 other. Pacific Presentations and Fun Productions, and then these couple of country guys who did a lot of country shows. Those were the players. So I kept knocking on the door of Pacific Presentations, and there were two partners there. One guy didn't want to hire me, the other guy did. The guy who did want to hire me was just the weirdest dude in the world, you know, just
Is he still alive? Can we mention who he is?
Oh yeah, we can.
Is that Gary Perkins?
No.
Sepp Donauer?
Sepp Donauer. Sepp Donauer. Perkins didn't want to hire me. Sepp didn't want to hire me. But Sepp was this creative genius. But it was a little more creative, like on the day of a small stadium show in San Bernardino with AC/DC, that he shows up at 10 in the morning and says, you know what? I really want the stage at the other end of the field.
That's not creative, that's chaos.
Yeah, so it was like, no, that's not going to work, and here's why it's not going to work. We've been here for 4 fucking days building this. So I started off in production. I moved into marketing. Started going around taking meetings with everybody. Started taking meetings with agents because I knew them from Seattle, but I wasn't a talent buyer. And then I started getting phone calls.
Yeah, and then it all starts. Let me ask you a question here. You mentioned that you put your own money at risk, and I think, but back in the day, as you might remember, back you were talking to Jim Garno, one of the illustrious alumni at Avalon, and we used to do that little funny trick of like taking the $100 bill and burning to see if anybody really was paying attention. And the moral of that story was, if it bothered you to watch the money burn, you weren't going to be much of a promoter.
Right.
Talk about that a little bit. When a promoter is putting out big money, without getting into all the details, what kind of margins are most promoters working on, minus the sponsorships and some of the things that are now part of today's business? Back in the day,
None of that existed.
yeah,
Rebates from venues, they didn't exist. We didn't see our first rebate until Ticketmaster started.
yeah,
And
yeah.
we got on board with Ticketmaster and introduced them to all the players, and we got.
Now, those for the folks out there watching, those are what are known as kind of the insides. When
Right.
you get a service charge, and some of that money comes back to the promoters that are doing business.
That was the
and so
first
forth.
time it ever happened. Before then, deals were normally, you take all the expenses, you subtract the gross, whatever's left over, the artist was getting 85% of, and you were getting 15% of. And if you were doing a show at the Los Angeles Coliseum with The Who, you had to come up with a big deposit.
Which is part of and the way that works, just to explain, folks, your guarantee might be, let's say it's $1 million, you'd have to pay a deposit of what?
At that time, it was 50%.
50%, yeah.
But now, ticket prices
Much lower.
much lower, so the guarantees were like $250. But I mortgaged my house. I got a call from one of the most famous agents, the most famous agent, the guy who started the agency business, Frank Barcelona in New York. And he said, hey, Wolf and Miller can't come up with the deposit for The Who at the Coliseum. If you can get me $125,000 by tomorrow, you're my new promoter in LA. Well, that was like, oh my God. So I mortgaged my house. Got the 125, had the bank wire it to New York, and I took over a show at the Coliseum.
Wow. And so now, for the folks out there that thinks that it's easy, you're going to put up that 125, but when it was 15% of the gross, and when all the dust had settled, the promoter was going to make 7 or 8% net profit, right?
Yeah.
But that happened, correct me if I'm wrong, Murph, when you sold 100% of the tickets. What happens if you sold 70% of the tickets?
Well, you were probably breaking even.
60% selling the house. Your house, not the...
Right.
Yeah.
Yeah. Everything was instinct. Everything was gut. You followed music, you were into music, you played all the music. You had a lot of time to listen to music because there were no other interruptions except the telephone.
No internet.
So we listened to music all the time in the office. We got turned on to a lot of stuff, and honestly, you know, in those days, if you sold out a big show, you were probably making 10% of the gross revenue of the show. And you tried not to bet too large. Mm-hmm. You tried to get in as cheap as you could. Mm-hmm. But, you know, I was like 23. And it was like, you know, Frank Barcelona was this.
He was the kingmaker. He was Bruce Springsteen. He was basically, for you folks out there watching, for any English act that was worth a shit back in the day, he was your agent. He was the go-to guy.
Led Zeppelin, it was everything.
You name it.
He had it all.
Let me ask you this. You know, one of the hot button things, and I think one of the most misunderstood things when people are buying tickets for a concert is how the price of the ticket gets determined. Talk about when you're putting together a show with whatever the artist is, you know, that relationship between their pay, ticket price, ticket service charges, and all that.
Well, I tried to maintain most of my relationships with managers. There was competition in Los Angeles, so there were multiple promoters. So an agent was going to call every promoter and tell each promoter what the last guy had offered. You know, well, he's offering $7,500 at a $7.50 ticket. So I tried to develop my relationships with the managers. And what I talked to them about was, you never want to come into this town and be embarrassed. You only want to come into this town and sell out. So we're going to pick the right building first, then the right ticket price. And then I'll talk to your agent, because then it's just arithmetic at that point.
Yeah.
Now there's no more conversations about bidding it up or bidding it up, because the managers, literally, I was their eyes and ears in a market that could be 3,000 miles away from where they lived. And literally, they got their information from reading tip sheets and talking to their concert promoters, because we lived on the street.
That was the smart managers.
Right.
Because you and I know, you know, there were some that weren't quite so savvy, that were only ever interested in
the
guarantee.
Right.
How did you deal with managers like that when the numbers just didn't add up?
They ended up not being on my hit list.
So you said no.
Yeah, yeah.
And
some people were just too difficult to deal with, and it was a waste of my time.
Yeah.
It really was. I could get more done working with people that agreed with my philosophy than trying to convince someone who was only interested in the money.
Because that winds up being short-term thinking at the end of the day, and really does. And speaking now as a former manager, schooled in the arithmetic of the concert business, for the managers out there that are watching, or the artists that think it's just about your guarantee and forget that there's a connection between ticket price and people's willingness or ability to pay that ticket price and how many people you're going to draw, you're making a big, big mistake. I want to talk about something else that you alluded to there briefly. When you started in the business, even back 30 some odd years ago when I first, met you and started working there, it was a small business by today's standards. When I say small, the numbers weren't necessarily small, but it was very folksy in the sense that Brian Murphy went to the airport and picked up managers. You told me, hey, Steve, you want to make a relationship? Here, why don't you go pick up the manager to The Cure, who I hear are playing in some stadium in town here coming up. So it was a very personal approach. There were 2 or 3 bookers. There was a production team. We had a ticket gal. We had 2 or 3 people in our advertising agency. But that was it, okay? When you were a manager booking a show with Brian Murphy, to your comment about they were your eyes and ears, the guy that booked the show was the guy that was marketing. Today, with the advent of, when SFX came in and started buying up the local promoters, took the company public, and now it's changed hands or changed names a few times. It's now a much different concert business today. And having book shows in the past with Brian Murphy, it was difficult for me as a manager to start meeting all the new team here. Talk about how what shall we call it, the corporatization of the concert business has affected the way you do business today.
As soon as the conglomeration began, and SFX bought maybe 17 companies. I think we were number 15. They started on the east and worked their way west, and they were only buying concert promoters who had amphitheaters. That was the model. Mm-hmm. These yokels. This is Bob Silverman.
Who's now, for you folks don't know, is the EDM. What's his thing?
It's EDM
SFX,
dropping. Is what it's called.
Yeah.
EDM dropping.
Quickly. So he started
he was like, we're going to become NASCAR. You guys have missed the boat. We're going to have so many sponsors in our amphitheaters. We're going to make so much more money on sponsorship that we're going to be able to pay acts bigger money to play the amphitheaters than for them to play the arena, because we own everything. We own the parking, the food, the beverage, the rebates, the blah, you name it, mm-hmm. and the sponsorship. Mm. So that was the model, and that ended for a lot of guys like me. I was thunderstruck. Mm-hmm. I literally, I fought mm-hmm. For my territory, mm-hmm. And everybody wanted LA, so it was like, the guys in New York were like, yeah, well, Brian Murphy, that's okay, but you can talk to us in New York about Brian in LA. Mm-hmm. And so I found these people going around me, and it was not a good experience. I fought the sale of the company. I wanted more money for it, but I had Geddes and Irving Azoff as partners. So I knew I was going to be biting the short end of that paycheck. So the first time I went to New York, and he consolidated everybody, he brought them to New York, and he walked around the table and he introduced everybody. I stood up and I said, "I'm Brian Murphy," and he walked right past me.
Yeah, so he'd been doing his homework.
Yeah.
Let me ask you this: has it changed the way, in knowing you the way I do, I can understand why that was difficult, but you still are out booking shows. Right. You've stayed remarkably close to your knitting. You other folks have gone on to do different things, tried to. Brian Murphy has been a great promoter, has stayed a great promoter in spite of all that. Does it change the way you do business now as Brian Murphy? Have you adapted to the new machine in terms of going out and booking national tours and taking different looks at things that you might not have taken a look at when you were one of the guys here in LA rather than part of one of the guys in a big corporation?
Yeah, I ended up with the transition of SFX through all of its various entities to Live Nation, and ended up over with Live Nation under, and that was a bad ride when we were Clear Channel. Mm-hmm. It became a very good ride when Michael Rapino took over. Mm. So Michael Rapino basically got it. He understood. And he moved the headquarters to LA. Mm-hmm. So there was a lot more scrutiny, but actually I got the opportunity to do more than I had under previous administration. So I really enjoyed that, but you were no longer the marketer. There was a marketing department. Mm-hmm. There was a ticketing department. There was your production managers in their department. And everyone became talent buyers. Mm-hmm. They would buy the show, and then they would turn the paperwork into the system, and marketers would market, and ticketing would ticket, and everything, and it was like, that just does not work for me.
Yeah.
I am going to be in charge of the marketing of my show. I'm going to be in charge of the ticketing. I'm going to be in charge of the production. I'm going to do everything the way I've always done it, because that's what my managers expect me to do.
Yeah, and as one of your former managers, and playing then a manager, I subscribe to that in a big way, and it's something that I missed amongst that, and I don't have to worry about it now. Let's take a little break here. I want to talk about pay some bills here, Murphy. You mentioned this is kind of like a radio show. We're like a radio show without advertisers, unfortunately. So I want to take a little break and talk about something called RenmanU. About last January, a while back, we were trying to figure out how to better serve these people that are looking to do something big in the music business. So we launched an online course I call RenmanU's Insider's Guide to Today's Music Business. The course is made up of 150 video lessons that cover all the important aspects of today's music business: record labels, publishing, managers, agents, all that kind of, and a lot about touring as well. Each week on the show, we try to feature a lesson of the week from the course to give folks an idea of what it's all about, in the hopes that they might be so inspired that they would actually buy it. Kira's nodding her head over. Thank you, Kira. I think she got a free course, but she's gotten the mother's milk of this place, I guarantee you. Anyway, this week's lesson of the week is from our touring module. All right, we got all kinds of things we talk about there, Murph, intro, where the songs. A lot of these lessons I learned from this man right over here to the right here. This week's lesson of the week, you actually touched on a little bit. It's called Building a Touring Strategy, and I want to play it for you right now here. Code, our lesson of the week, touring strategy. Live touring business does not happen by accident. The most successful touring artists have a strategy for building their business around some tried and true key elements. Having a successful touring business or a gig is all about putting the right band in the right venue on the right date for the right ticket price. If you're a promoter, getting the right band means getting one that can draw enough people to pay the bills. When you're an artist or a band just getting started, you want to be that right band that can get a gig somewhere, anywhere when you're first starting. And once you get that first gig, you want to get another one. And the only way that happens is if you keep getting better. When you're just starting out, that right band might mean a band willing to play in somebody's backyard at a party. It might mean a band that can get 50 friends to buy tickets at a local club, whatever it might be. Once you've got that band, you need to put them in the right venue. And that means a venue with the right capacity and one that's appropriate for that band's style. Venues come in all different sizes. You got clubs that range anywhere from 100 seats up to 1,000 seats. Theaters can range anywhere from 1,000 to 3,000 seats typically. The mid-sized venues are typically in that 5,000 to 6,000 capacity. There's a ton of great amphitheaters around America that range anywhere from 15 to 30,000 seats. They're typically owned by the big promoters. At the arena level, you've got places like Madison Square Garden and Staples Center that range anywhere from 15,000 to 20,000 seats. And from there, if you're lucky enough to play stadiums, those will range anywhere from 40,000 to damn near 100,000. Festivals, the same. If an artist is just getting started and does not have much of a draw, then you'd be smart to book them in as small a venue as you can. You'd also want to make sure that that venue fits the vibe of an artist. An acoustic artist in some slimy rock club with no chairs might be a horrible idea. That very same act in a small cafe with a sense of intimacy would be much better. If you're working with a huge artist like Taylor Swift, who has a limited number of dates to work, you might choose to play as big a venue as you can find. Getting the right venue is all about getting that right artist and putting him in a venue that they can fill. All right, so there, folks, you can see that I learned my lessons well from Mr. Murphy here. I want to talk about, Murph, about how you go about building a live business. But first, we got a question from the chat room. Joseph, take it away.
Yeah, Katy wants to know what are a few characteristics of a new band or singer-songwriter that you look for?
What gets on your radar, Murph?
You know what? Does it resonate? It's either the music or it's the lyrics. Hopefully, it's both. Does it resonate with me? I'm really despite all these huge bands that I have promoted, at heart, I'm a singer-songwriter kind of guy. My preference is a single artist on a stage with a guitar or piano playing for an audience. That's the most intimate setting I can think of. I think it's the best experience for both the artist and for the audience. And I think those are the kind of moments that, as a promoter, you're really trying to create memories for people. You put the act and the audience together, and you create memories. And that's how I've always looked at it. So I'm a big singer-songwriter guy, but it's all about how does it resonate for me. There's certain type of music that I don't care about, and then there's a whole lot of music that I passionately care about. And some of the stuff that I don't care about is just actually me being too lazy to, at the time, during that time period, to adapt to a change that was happening in the music business that didn't resonate with me, and I made a decision for our company to stay out of that type of business. Actually, that's what began Golden Voice.
Yeah.
Avalon Attractions, where Ren and I met and worked together for years, was this great little boutique of really cool personalities. We had always had 3 or 4 really interesting people at the company that were creating their own relationships. But when punk music came along, we really didn't have an advocate for it. And Paul Tollett, Gary Tovar, they started this company called Golden Voice, and they actually came over and visited and said, hey, we're going to be a concert promoter, we're going to concentrate on punk. And I was like, yeah, okay.
Remember the first one we booked, Murph?
Well, I hope it wasn't the one where we got shut down.
Black Flag.
Oh yeah, Black Flag.
I remember going and saying, hey, we should work with these guys. What are you going to do? Black Flag. Murphy going, Black Flag? I don't know about that, Steve. And it ended with a riot, I believe, and helicopters, police with gear on, bloodied guys. Yeah. Go ahead. Sorry to interrupt here, Murph.
Yeah. No, we did. We got shut down. And what happened to Golden Voice is that because of punk and because of what it represented, which was foreign to most people, especially corporate types, insurance companies. All these claims came in, and it was like, we're not going to insure you anymore. And actually, Paul Tollett came over and he said, I have a little problem. I said, listen, I'll co-promote with you because you know what you're doing. I'll put up with the insurance, and I'll be a partner. And
let's talk a little bit more about that Paul Tollett thing here, because you mentioned a couple of things in there that kind of hit home that you were reading my mind here. As you mentioned, back in the 80s, we had an exclusive at the Hollywood Palladium, right? And we could have rented that place or not rented it to people, right? And the lesson here is that, when you're doing business with people, is to try to do them right. I had a chance to interview Paul back at the Polestar thing back in Nashville a couple of years. I don't know if you were there or not.
No.
Anyway, there we are. Look at that mug, right?
There you go.
Paul still got that baseball hat on. We used to call him the Beeve because he was so innocent, and the gentleman he was working for, we could just say, wasn't that innocent on any number of levels, as it turns out. I had a chance to interview him. What was interesting is that we talked about all kinds of different things, but one of the things we talked about, and really it's down to you, Murph, and your mentality, was he talked about this notion of competing with other people in the market. Play that little clip for me, would you, Cub?
Avalon Attractions, the classic era, I'm going to call it, was Brian Murphy, who owned, Bob Geddes was in the background. But he wasn't in the forefront. He's probably the biggest owner for all I know. Brian, you, Jim Garino, Moss Jacobs. And these were like stellar promoters. Every one of them had relationships, had this and that, right? I never looked at them as the enemy. They never looked at us as the enemy.
Now, in a very competitive business, Murphy, I think that's a great compliment to you, and all the other folks he mentioned, picked up a lot of their cues from you. Thoughts on that? The value of relationships and competing with honor and dignity?
Yeah. I mean, other than, when I walked in here today, Rennie said, hey, the guy with the soft touch, the guy who never screamed, never yelled. How can you forget the Bill Graham, Brian Murphy conversation where I was on my fucking desk screaming at Bill Graham for trying to bring shows into Southern California, and just what fucking? As a matter of fact, it was your tour with George Michael.
I recall there were some screaming matches with Bill Graham.
His company booked it into the amphitheater, which was where we wanted to play, and Bill called up and he said, "Well, that's not going to happen. You can't have the amphitheater." And I was like, "Hey, your whole team said it's booked and we're ready to go." "No, you're not coming into Northern California." And I says, "Then George Michael is not going to play your amphitheater. We're going to go play Oakland, and you're not involved. You're out. So do you want to be in or do you want to be out?"
Yeah. For some of the folks that don't know Bill Graham or don't know of Bill Graham, he was he was a screamer. That I can assure you. Well, I didn't mean to say that you never scream, Murph, but amongst your gang of customers over there, you were the most dignified screamer.
Yeah.
I can tell you that. And you did have a soft touch. But even people with a soft touch in the business, you don't need to be a screamer to kind of assert the boundaries of a conversation, right? And I think what I've learned from you over the years is that is probably more loud than is good for me at times, is that soft touch can play as long as people don't mistake, and we talk about it all the time, they don't mistake your willingness for weakness, which was at the core of one of the many. I remember more of those arguments about the Grateful Dead and Bill, Bill Graham, God bless his soul, had a wonderful way of spinning a yarn to tell you that he was really sorry he was going to fuck you, but it was really good for you, okay? You're going to like this, really, you are. I'll come back to the Paul Tollett thing in a minute, but there's something else that you touched on, as I'm bouncing around here, Cody. You've not only had a great eye for talent, musical talent, and people that could sell tickets, which is helpful if you're in the concert business, but you've also had a pretty good eye for business talent. And as I was rummaging through all the our old photos and stuff, trying to get prepared for today, I came across a photo that's actually sat in my office for years. I want to show you this gang of customers, Murphy, that you managed to wrangle in here. From left to right, Ted Mankino, I believe, is still working at Live Nation in Washington area, Washington D.C. Moss Jacobs to his right, big time promoter, worked at Nederlanders here for years, King of Santa Barbara. Andy Hewitt, my good friend Andy. Not so much. Bill Silva, one of the great guys in the business. Jim Guerno, me, okay, left fielder. Jen Perry and others. Murph, when you were looking for young business talent back in the day, and by the way, that's the old clash of it. You've had plenty of great ones since then, When somebody is approaching you about trying to work in the business, say, hey, I'm interested, what are the things that a guy like Brian Murphy is looking for when you hire somebody to work for you in the concert business?
When I started Avalon with Gary Perkins, I recruited. I actually went out and actively recruited. And I always went to colleges. And I always went for the guy who ran the programming board and who was on that programming board. And honestly, that's where 80%, for about 10 years, that's about 80% of the hires that we made. They could have ended up in marketing, they could have ended up in production, in ticketing, as a talent buyer, in accounting, but I recruited from the colleges because those were people who were walking in the door with some knowledge.
So experience meant something. How important was having a great attitude?
That was number one.
That was number one. Ahead of experience, folks. We talk about this all the time with young folks, and they tend to think too much about it, you know, and they hold up their degree or their piece of paper that says, hey, I know the music business, but folks, you've heard it again, okay? People in the music business hire for attitude first. The experience will come later. Fair comment?
No, it's, you need to be a people person. You need to be able to network. You need to have time to go out and go to shows and seek out people and start conversations, and you know, you just whatever. When you're in an entry-level world, you want to move up as quickly as you can. The quickest way you can do that is learn as much as you can on-the-job training, and bring that skill set to the office, and be out there. Mm-hmm. Be out there every night, because I wasn't out there every night. Mm-hmm. And you guys would bring me. Rennie came in one day and he was like, dude, we got Tears for Fears. Have you heard this? And I said, yeah, I heard it on K-Rock. He says, yeah, but there's like 3 or 4 songs here. And he played me 3 or 4 songs. And I was like, I said, that's real good shit. And
yeah.
He says, well, I think I got a lead on him, and let's get him. Let's go book him. And I was like, Steve, just go for it.
I can remember, you know, again, in terms of networking, you know, Murphy taught me some great lessons, and Murphy was also very supportive. And I can recall making that call to you, and I remember making that call from England, because I had been going over to England, and I thought I was pretty clever. I said, hey, Murph, you know, if I pay for my airfare to go over to London, will you pay for a hotel for a couple, 3 weeks? And I don't know if you ever really figured it, but my mother worked for an airline, so I was getting that ticket for $100, you know. But I can remember sitting with you and Bob, and they go, what are you going to do over there? I go, I don't know, I'm just going to go meet some folks. And I can remember seeing Tears for Fears in a little club in Bath, England, and making that call at 4 o'clock in the morning, and just, you know, because it was still, what, 4, you know, it was afternoon in LA, and who the fuck else was I going to be talking to at that time in the morning? And then we ultimately came back and brought him to LA, only to lose him at Irvine Meadows, because I got that call that Murphy talked about earlier about the guy who says, hey, Steve, that money you're paying, your buddy Andy Hewitt, who's in that picture. Go back to that picture. Okay, Andy Hewitt, where is he? That guy there with between Bill Silva and Moss Jacobs, that guy fucked us on that, okay? He's now partners with Bill Silva at the Hollywood Bowl. Andy, I'm just kidding, I'm over it, kind of, okay? Valuable lesson I learned, being friends with somebody in the music business, does that get you the lowest deal or just get you the deal, Murph?
It gets you the opportunity.
Exactly.
It gets you the conversation.
Exactly.
Is what it gets you.
So there's your lesson, folks. You know, experience first, or enthusiasm and the right attitude first, and then experience. I want to go back to Golden Voice for a second.
I want to tell you that's probably the only time in the chain of when we started at the Hollywood Palladium with Tears for Fears that we lost. Mm-hmm. Yeah. As soon as they played that other amphitheater in Orange County, they came right back to us.
Yeah. Well, that brings up a couple things here. Question in the chat room. Okay, so you guys help me out here. We're rolling. It's like old times here, you know what I mean? Question in the chat room there.
Yeah, it's a little specific, but they want to know how the LA concert scene has changed since the reopening of the Forum.
I think that's a great question, because we've been talking about venues. In the early days, Brian Murphy would go in and rent a building. Somebody owned it. You got no popcorn pier parking. The amphitheaters changed, and that's what we were just talking about. There were 2 amphitheaters down in Orange County. So real estate has become a big part of the business. When I first started working for you, the Forum was the place. What did we do, 60, 80?
We did.
Ton.
Everybody believed we had an exclusive at the Forum, and we did not. It was that the key, honestly, that was one of the biggest keys for our little company Avalon to take a big step, because the most popular room in town was the Forum, because the Lakers were there, and Showtime, and Magic Johnson, and all of this. And they got a new owner, Dr. Jerry Buss. He became the owner, and Wolf and Rissmiller was this dominant promoter, and they had a meeting, and he said, listen, I'm going to start a Senate Terrace program. I'm taking 2,000 seats right near the stage, off the Manifest. I'm going to sell them on private seat licenses to people.
Read more money.
I'm keeping that revenue, and I'm going to reduce your costs by this much so the bands can still make a lot of money. And he gave that to Steve Wolf and Jim Rissmiller, and they said, go fuck yourself. We're taking all of our shows to the LA Sports Arena. So I got the next phone call. And I was there and I said, easy, no problem. I can sell this. I can make this happen. And I walked out of there going, damn, this is not going to be an easy conversation with anybody. But, you know, over time you develop a story. You develop a story about, you know, it's the right room. You know, there's still fans.
Yeah.
It's, you know, and you're making more. And, you know, the LA Sports Arena was...
It was a dump.
It was a dump.
There's only one guy that liked to play the sports arena. Who was that, Murph?
Bruce Springsteen.
Bruce Springsteen, because it reminded him of fucking Jersey, okay? Let's be honest, okay? Ironically, though, he opened up the building that for years put the freaking sword right through the heart of the Forum, and it was the Staples Center that changed everything, you know?
I think that was as close as I ever got to losing a relationship with an artist, was asking Bruce Springsteen to open the new building, Staples Center. Because it wasn't finished. I didn't know exactly what it was going to look like inside. Bruce's right-hand guy, George Travis, flew out to LA. We walked the cement inside of the building, and George was like, yeah, we can make this work. Bruce Springsteen's the first show in the building, and he walks in from this, he's been in the sports arena all of his life, 18,000 seat, intimate building in downtown Los Angeles next to USC campus. He's been there all of his life in this funky old building. He goes into this brand new Staples Center, and there are three balconies of suites that wrap the building around. So you got an audience, and then you got 3 balconies of suites, and then you have an audience up on top. And and John Landau is Bruce Springsteen's manager. John and I were standing in the hallway. Bruce was on stage, sound checking, and he walked off stage, walked over to us, threw an arm around my shoulder, arm around John's shoulder. He says, remind me again, why the fuck am I playing here? And over the next 4 nights, he worked up a routine in his show about the suites. And it became hilarious. Just, I mean, he just, you know, he had his humor.
You ripped him.
He just built, every day he added something, and it became the highlight of the show.
Yeah.
But that was it for him.
Yeah.
He had never been in a venue like that before, so it was not as cozy and comfortable.
Yeah.
Now
that they, you know, the Staples became such a popular venue.
right.
3 teams in there, hockey team, 2 basketball team, Mondays and Tuesday nights to deal with. Then you got the Grammy Awards, which takes out. So the Forum, which had turned into a dump to be turned into a church and all kinds of stuff, was, you know, hadn't been renovated in years. The only place in America you're still peeing into troughs if you're a guy. I never went in the girls' bathroom. I hope it was a little cozier in there. All right. MSG comes along, buys it, and now has got back in the game. So to that gentleman's question here, how has that changed your job here in LA in terms of booking arena shows?
Okay, this is...
I don't want to get you in trouble here, Murph.
I think this is going to be a bit of a delicate conversation.
Well, don't get us both in trouble. I don't have to worry about it.
No. The last few years that I was at Live Nation, we changed presidents, which means I got moved aside. I got this title called chairman. And when I got the title, I said, oh, good, that's great. Now there's only one door left. It says exit. There's nowhere you can go from this title.
Yeah.
And they brought Rick Mueller, very good friend of mine, from San Francisco down to run LA. We bought Ticketmaster at Live Nation. Irving started coming to all the shows, and he never talked to Rick. And I said, I'm embarrassed by this. Rick, I'm going to set up a lunch with you and me and Irving. And he's going to get to know who you are because you're the guy. So we had this lunch, and all Irving talked about, this was 2010, maybe October. Hey, I've talked to James Dolan. He's going to buy the Forum. We're going to take all of our shows out of fucking Staples Center. We're going to move them into the Forum. We're going to fuck with those guys, the AEG company downtown. And this is really, nobody knows. Nobody knows this is going to happen, but you're going to be talking to people at MSG about building a business model for the Forum. And we walked out of there, we got in the car, and Rick says, what do you think we should do with this information? I said, absolutely nothing. I said, because one of us is going to get a phone call from AEG. Because they can't put 85 million into a building that they already spent 400 million on. They need people with relationships that can keep artists in Staples Center. And I says, and that's probably what's going to happen. And on the 19th of December, I got the phone call.
And now you're working with that guy, the relationships again, right?
Yeah.
Paul Tollett at Golden Voice. And funny how the circle all comes around here. Talk about what you're doing over there at Golden Voice now. In your role, you just got through promoting a shit pile of Katy Perry dates around America. Talk about your day over there at Golden Voice now. Do you play the mentor? You play the booker? Do you play a little bit of both?
Yeah, I play a little bit of both. Honestly, the talent buyers over at Golden Voice they're simply fucking amazing. I mean, they're hot shit. They're really great at their jobs. They have built great relationships on their own. The only thing I did when I went over there to Golden Voice was I created responsibility and authority for the venues that Golden Voice was responsible for. So we had Staples, we had the Nokia Theater, now the Microsoft Theater, we had this club, and we had this building, we had Club Nokia. And so I appointed someone to be responsible for that building. I said, this is your building, that's your budget, that's what you have to do, this is what you eat, breathe every day. Susan, the Nokia Theater is yours. Go for it. And just went around and had those conversations, and some of that already existed, but AEG did have. I mean, Golden Voice, AEG had a reputation at that time of like they were just one step slow in the process with getting back to people with information. That was the rap that I had heard about them when I was at Live Nation. It wasn't the case at all when I got over there. But now I work with all of the artists that I've ever worked with. I work with those same managers, but some of those same managers have now moved along, and one of my very, very best friends, Steve Jensen,
Katy Perry?
has managed 20 artists, and I've promoted every one of them. But he told me about this girl, Katy Perry, played this song for me. He said, they're playing it on K-Rock. He said, I got an offer to do the Warped Tour. And I said, really? He said, yeah, we're going to do it. I said, okay. I got some work dates. And then that single was the only single that resonated with that audience. after that, the next single that came out became more of a pop song, crossed over from the alternative stations to the hot ACs and pop radio stations. And she decided to do a club tour, and I said, Steve, just sign me up for this. I want everything I can get. I said, you know what, I believe in you. And by coincidence, my wife was a music publisher at Warner Chappell Music. She signed Katy Perry to Warner Chappell Music, and I actually met Katy through my wife before I met Katy through her manager. And she seemed like a very smart and very lovely person. And my wife has the greatest ears in the world. And I bought in. And you know, we grew. We did an arena tour. I mean, Steve has got all of his promoter relationships in line. He's been doing this for a long time as a manager. So I'm one, and there are others. But the first time we did the arena tour, we all got our various dates around the country. Katy's, as I said, she's very smart. She has friends, Miley Cyrus, Rihanna, go on the list, and they're talking about tour deals. So she talked to her manager about a tour deal, and Steve said, I would like you and Live Nation to both turn in a tour deal for the U.S.
For U.S. tour, not just a specific market.
Just the United States. And how many markets and blah, 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 and ticket price and all of this stuff. And as I said, you don't do, maybe I didn't say this, none of this you do by yourself. You've got great people that surround you, that you go to for advice, and you go to see what their opinion is. And I put a team together of about 8 people, and we became the Katy Perry team. And we put our offer together, and we won. We got the Katy Perry tour, and it was a big step because she had become ginormously popular from the first arena tour to the second arena tour. So it really came down to talking about ticket price and talking about the right building in each market to play. And Katy had an opinion about certain venues she wanted to play across the country. You know, I want to play Madison Square Garden. Please don't play Madison Square Garden.
Everybody wants to play
Madison Square Garden, then we have to write them a check at the end of the night because we won't make any money. But I'm joking aside.
Well, that's not really a joke, folks. I can attest to that.
But, you know, it worked because they have a great team at direct management. At the end of the day, Katy makes her decisions. And I think really because I had established a relationship early was the reason I got the tour.
Well, right here, folks, you know that great minds think alike, or great mind then somebody copies. I'd written down this whole thing about the value of relationships in business, and when I wrote it down this morning, Murphy, I was thinking about Steve Jensen, Martin Kirkup, and Katy Perry. And you touched on another important point there for folks. You started at the clubs, and they built to success brick by brick, and it really is everything Murphy just said there, all the things I copied in that touring strategy thing. Right artist, right time, right building, right venue, right ticket price. And if you can get an artist on the other end of that conversation that's not obsessed about the business but understands the big picture of the business, you can make great things happen. We're running out of time here. I want to talk, well, that'll be a good segue to this last thing. As I was going through, putting together today's show, I had a chance to go through so many old photos and things that Kathy Fergal and people had sent me over the years courtesy of Facebook. And it occurred to me that I must be the luckiest bastard in the world to have had so many unbelievable, great moments in this music business as a promoter, as a record executive, and certainly as a manager with my friends in Incubus. But there was no greater moment. I can remember my very first great moment, and I'll see if you'll remember it as well, was
I
back
already
in
know.
1987 at U2. And I want to show you a picture of this little set. Back, of course, we were backstage hanging. Please note that back in 87, everybody was very wide-eyed and all wore ties with many pockets. I'll leave the rest for you to Google. But I did have a chance to eat dinner with McGinnis one year, and I should send him that fucking picture. He loved it. But that night, show me the venue here. I keep it in my office, so I think about it all the time. There was the Coliseum back in 1987. And over on the left-hand side, if you're looking at that picture, was a riser, or a riser, and there were only two people standing on it that night. Murph, I don't know if you remember, but it was you and me standing there, and I remember, I'll never forget, they dropped the lights, and at the Coliseum, what you can't see behind the peristyle end is 110 steps coming down from the backstage area, and the guy hits the flashlight, so the crowd couldn't see it, but the lights are dim, but you could see this little light in the guy with the flashlight, you know, taking the band down the stage, and the crowd erupting. The band breaks into, I forget what the first song, no video back then. Remember, they didn't want to have video.
No.
And I remember sitting there with Brian Murphy looking out there going, Jesus Christ, we are the guys tonight. What I really meant to say is you were the guy, and I was happy to be there. And I'll never forget that. That was my first great moment of where I thought, fuck, I'm actually doing this for a living. And I know that so many of the people watching our show here today want to have a great moment like that, and I hope they do. Any great moments that stand out for you, Murph, through your long, successful career in the music business?
You know, obviously.
Was that the one you were thinking of, Murph?
Yeah, obviously.
Yeah.
It was, you know, my first big, great moment was getting to work with Bruce Springsteen. I was not Bruce Springsteen's concert promoter in LA during the 1970s. He worked for the bigger company, Wolf and Rissmiller, while I was trying to get started. But after I came up with the money to do that Who show for Frank Barcelona, who represented Bruce Springsteen, he took Bruce Springsteen from Wolf and Rissmiller for some very obvious and good reasons why we don't need to talk about now. And there was this new record coming out, Born in the USA. Hello. We did 7 nights at the LA Sports Arena, and then we went into the LA Coliseum for 4 shows. And I am the concert promoter that always believed, whatever number you want to get to, if you want to do 2 shows, start with 1. If you want to do 3 or 4 shows, start with 1. Go on sale with 1 show, because that's how you know how big you're going to get. Bruce Springsteen, I said, put them all up. Put them all up. Put every ticket on sale. We're putting all 4 shows up, and within, I don't know, it took a long time to sell tickets back then, longer than it does now. But that day, we sold 350,000 tickets.
Thank you. And I remember, even though it took a little bit longer, I remember you'd send everybody around to check out certain places, because you used to drive around and see how many people were in the line at Tower Records. That was how scientific it was, right? And I think I got assigned to the Ticketmaster headquarters, where they built a new headquarters where you could sit in the bowels of the beast. And this thing was just blowing out so freaking big, I couldn't believe it. And as a big Bruce Springsteen fan, it was just like, I'm thinking, man, is this the greatest freaking business in the world? I wish we could have had him for 3 weeks like he played in Jersey.
Right. You
know, I didn't take back that crack about Jersey. I know I'm already getting emails about that. I love Jersey. There's a lot of fine golf courses in Jersey. Bruce Springsteen. Well, Murph, you know what? I'm sure we all got a few more moments left before that we're asked to check out here. But I wanted to say thanks so much for taking the time to join us and ask for speaking to the folks out there. Kira's here today, who's dreaming about doing something big and is on her way, and Cody and Joseph Pepoloni just moved out here from South Carolina, the same way you moved from Washington. Any final bits of advice for people that are thinking about doing something in this business, whether it's an artist, as a concert promoter, a manager, label exec, whatever it might be?
Well, my advice to everybody back in the beginning of when they came knocking on the door was, you know what, you should work for everybody. You should work at a label, you should work for a concert promoter, you should work for a management company, you should, spend a year making the rounds, getting a job, getting in, find out where your passion is, and then pick that. That's where you go. Well, I can no longer recommend being in music publishing or at a record label. But an agency, a management company, a concert promoter, all of them are great starting points because you learn if you're a manager, you learn all about the concert business when you're in the management company while you're working there. But you learn a lot more about what a manager does. And when you're at a concert promoter, you know everything about the live side of music and how the philosophies work and how the team works, etc. And the same over at an agency. Agencies are a little tougher because it seems like you've got to have like a resume, and I think
You have to have a degree, I think.
yeah, you gotta. It's like some places still start you in the mailroom.
Yeah. Unless you were Katy Perry's agent, then they'd hire you.
Yeah. When I got hired as an agent, I got hired as an agent.
See, that blows my mind because
Not as a mailroom guy or an assistant. I actually started a college division for the agency.
Yeah, see, you must have been killing it up there in Washington because, not today's show's about you, but I tried with William Morris and they said, nah, you got to finish your college degree. And I never did quite finish that one up here. So, well, that's it. That's great advice. Follow your passion, folks. And if you're lucky out there and you're trying to get some experience, you do well to find somebody like my friend, Mr. Brian Murphy, who can help fast track your learning and give you some lessons that you don't have to accept all the pain to learn. Although I do find, Murph, most people still want to get the pain. I'll never
You know what? It's the losing, failure are the biggest steps to success.
Yeah.
Because it's happened to me where I've started a project and it started off hugely successful. And then I figured out how to fuck it up. Because I didn't see all the pitfalls that I had missed by being successful. Hurting yourself, falling down, skinning your knee, scraping your elbow, getting yelled at, making a mistake. As long as you only do that one time and you learn from it and you move forward, then
Your mistakes.
it'll all go well.
Well, you know what? Great advice. I'm so happy, Murph, finally that on a show 120, we finally got to sit down and chat a little bit about the music business. I want to thank our wonderful crew over there, my band of renegades. There they are. Say hello, have it flipping up the Trojans. Look at Pepe over there. He's gone from SC, Southern Carolina to the real SC, by the way, USC, University of Southern California, okay? And that's it. All right, that's it for today, folks. We'll see you again next Wednesday. My name is Steve Rennie. The program's called Renman Live, and the website's called RenmanMusicandBusiness.com. If you're dreaming about doing something big in this music business, I hope today is the day you stop dreaming and start doing. My name is Steve Rennie. I'm out of here. I'll see you next week.